I'm delighted to be joined by Rachel Matthews today to talk through this first in a series of podcast-style interviews called Trading Through Challenging Times. And if anyone has traded through challenging times, in my knowledge of the alumni community, it is Rachel. So Rachel, I'm delighted to have you here today. I'm going to ask you lots of questions in a minute, and I'm pleased that you're going to agreed to share your experiences with us. But let's start in your happy place. So where are you at the moment? Tell me a little bit about the businesses you are now involved with, and then we'll go back to challenging past times.
Yeah. Okay, well, firstly, thank you for having me. It's really nice to have the opportunity to tell this story and hopefully help anyone who's going through something similar to see that there is a way through. Now I am CEO of the Beautiful Shoe Company Limited, and within that I have the Rachel Simpson brand. I have another retail site called Shoe Street, and I also do freelance design and social media content. And I have a second business called Heel and Soul, see what I did there, which is a luxury candle brand where I'm actually making the product as well. So what started as a hobby to get me through the challenges has now become a really nice small business in its own right. And thirdly, I'm design director of a community interest company called Soothing Stitches, which delivers workshops to the community to teach people new skills, but more importantly than that, bring communities together.
So when we first met, I was your growth expert on the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses programme. Yep. And you came to me with a very different shoe business then, which was very large, had its team, and had lots of ups and downs, should we put it that way? So let's talk through some of them. But do you want to go back to when we first met? And I think when you came on the programme with Rachel Simpson Shoes?
Yeah, so when I came on the Goldman Sachs course, I had a team of about 8 people, I think. I designed the shoes. I had an assistant designer as well. We manufactured the shoes in Spain and we exported all over the world. So at our peak, we had about 120 stockists, wholesale stockists. And we retailed on our website as well, B2C. So when I came on the course, it was the ideal time really, because I was prepared to hopefully springboard and grow and all of the things that you should do.
So I remember we had our group team meeting up in your factory in Birmingham, was it?
We did, didn't we? Yes, it was, in Birmingham. Yeah, I loved that office.
And we got to meet your team, who were all very excited, and we got to see all of your stock room and everything, because you were sorting everything. You were the warehouse, distribution, everything.
Yeah, so we had everything, very successfully, I think, in Birmingham. So like as you've just said, we had the office, we had the customer showroom, and we had the warehouse and all the logistics as well. So it was very sort of self-managed. We sort of looked after everything ourselves, which worked sort of very happily for many years.
You kind of like mother hen. The reason I'm saying that is because not only did you have a very successful business with some very beautiful shoes, but you also had a team that you'd really built a culture in. Yeah,
looking back, I think that's one of the many things I've learned, is that people and product I'm good at. I was about to say running the business side, not so good, but that would be underselling myself, which I'm quite good at.
It. Yeah.
But yeah, certainly I've always been a very people-focused person, because I think that's the most important thing to any business really, is the people, whether you work directly with them or your suppliers. I think if you treat people fairly, then you just have a better business for it. So that was always a very conscious decision. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. I think sometimes you can put that above your own needs, but that's a whole other story for another day.
Okay, well that's not for another day, that's for later today. Okay. So just going back a step then, you started an interest in shoes very early in your life.
So, ever since the age of, tiny, there's pictures of me sat painting or making, or generally making mess, calling it creativity. And went through school, GCSEs, A-levels, and the topics that I took were all art and design based. So I did an art foundation, which was best year of my education, which I highly recommend for any creative people who aren't quite sure which direction to go in. And people often ask me why shoes, and I think it's because it's a really beautiful combination of creativity and engineering. So you can be really creative and, you know, satisfy the sort of fine art sides of my personality and create something a little bit crazy, but it is a product at the end of the day which people need to wear, which needs to be engineered.
All right, well, we're very lucky that you did, because you created some amazing fashions and stuff. So do you want to talk us through how you built that business up? When did you actually start Rachel Simpson?
So Rachel Limited launched in 2008. So I graduated 2001, I think. So the sort of 7-8 years prior to launching the business, I had my own business, but that was more freelance design. So I worked for a lot of the sort of suppliers to the high street. It was around a time when shoes were going crazy.
So you started your business in a shed, like all great entrepreneurs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, people always like that story and they go, surely it wasn't a shed. I'm like, it literally was a shed. So when I started the business, I was freelancing for lots of suppliers who would supply the high street brands, and that was great fun. But I didn't want to give up the making side of shoes. So when I left university, I bought 2 old sewing machines, put this in this shed at the bottom of my garden in my house in Leicester, and I did handmade commissions. And most of the commissions that I got were for wedding shoes, because back then, back in 2008, the wedding shoe market was pretty stagnant, dare I say it. So you either went for a sort of satin square toe block heel thing from 1983, or you went Jimmy Choo, Christian Louboutin, and there wasn't really anybody doing the in-between. It's all changed now. There's some fantastic designers and the bridal market has really exploded, but back then there really wasn't that option. So people were coming to me to make their dream shoes something different, and I sort of thought, hang on a minute, and it was definitely a gap in the market. So I took that concept, because obviously making them one pair at a time rather, is quite an expensive price point. So I decided to take that concept, find myself a factory that would create those shoes that had that bespoke look, that were something different, but obviously at a much more achievable price point. And around that time, I knew that if I didn't do it now, I wasn't going to do it. So took the leap and started the business in 2008.
Excellent. And so when we met, your business was on a growth trajectory, and everything was looking bright, and all of the things we worked on together in your business growth plan. Yeah. I think the challenges that then came your way, I don't think we'd predicted any of them. So anything from cyber fraud to Brexit to COVID, none of those were in our plans. No. So talk me through how those challenges came, those dark swans arrived on your doorstep.
Yeah, so as you've just said, we were in a really good place. I was loving the Goldman Sachs program, really enjoying myself. On my birthday in 2018, I was actually in Madrid at the World Retail Congress, having a ball. It was really inspired, some great speakers, and I was sort of set to go home the day after, I think. And I got a phone call from WorldPay, and the long and short of it was that we'd been hit by a massive cyber fraud. So that meant that particular year we had a loss of just short of £100,000, so that wasn't a great year, but we came back from that through lots of hard work, and as you do. Then obviously COVID, everybody had a tough time, to put it mildly. But when I tell the story of what happened to the business since, which obviously we're going to come on to, it's incredible the amount of people that think it was due to COVID. And I almost want to shout from the rooftops, no, it wasn't COVID. You know, I'm actually really proud of how myself and my team got through COVID. You know, I mean, I think if I heard the word pivot one more time during that period, I think like most small business owners, I was, but we got through it. And actually, it was a period where we were able to really review what we were doing. We streamlined, we pivoted, all those things. So at the end of the pandemic, we were actually in quite a good position to really springboard, or so I thought. But then Brexit happened. So
Oh, no. So Rachel,
the
how
challenge
much-
I couldn't overcome.
Yeah, how much of your business was in Europe, roughly?
Yeah, so by the time the transition period ended, about 75% of our turnover was export, and 60% of that was to the EU. So, yeah, it was a big, huge part of our business, and that was B2B and B2C. So quite an even split at that time.
So Brexit is a term that covers lots of things, but from my memory, because we were having our growth group calls and everybody was feeling your pain and watching you get just tireder and more anxious and more frustrated. So there was obviously transport costs, there was loads more admin. Just talk us through, and what sort of support were you getting from?
Yeah, so I've told myself to try and keep this concise. But I think one of the most frustrating things about Brexit was that in the press, everybody was saying, get ready for Brexit. We tried. We tried so hard to get ready for Brexit. You know, myself and my operations manager, we went on every course going. But to give you an idea, I remember specifically one course we went on, and it was being delivered by a really well-known delivery company. And midway through the slides, the information was changing. So they would have prepared this talk, they'd sort of say, oh, actually no, disregard that slide, because it was almost like live to the, to the earpiece, and the information was changing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So what we'd lacked was tangible facts that we could actually use to plan with. So that, you know, we spent so much time sort of trying to map out scenarios, but there was no known risk. So at that time, we obviously knew it was going to affect us with such a huge proportion of our turnover being export, but we couldn't quantify any scenario because the facts just weren't there. So I've always worked very closely with the DIT. So yeah, so we've been exporting pretty much since the business started in 2008, and it was a pretty organic process. A company would just send an email or inquire, and if we didn't know how to do it, we'd find out. And the Department of International Trade were brilliant, and I had a great international trade tutor there. So they were fantastic, but even they were struggling to actually find the information we needed. So as I say, we went on every course going. We tried to quantify the risks of staying in the UK versus moving all our operations into the EU. But right up until December 2020, we just you couldn't put figures on it. You know, I'd be trying to find out what the rate of duty would be for footwear going this way, that way, and was a bit like trying to find, you know, a unicorn. It was nigh impossible. So we took the decision that we would stay in the UK and see if we could make that work. Because obviously staying in the UK, some risk, some expense, moving to the EU, probably bigger risk and definitely more expense. So we made the decision to keep our operations in Birmingham and see what happened.
Okay, so I'm going to ask, so that's all going on in the business, and I think all of the businesses watching this and all the entrepreneurs watching this and hoping for growth will be feeling your pain, where factors that you can't control are going everywhere. What was happening in Rachel's head? How were you feeling at this point? Were you still, I'm going to beat them, I'm going to do this, or what was happening to you?
I am an eternal optimist. So I have, and I think, I'm actually not keen on the word on entrepreneur, but I've since learned that I think I am one. But I think all small business owners, entrepreneurs, whatever you want to call them, I think you have to be. Yeah. You know, I remember one interview with Boris Johnson around this period where they'd just done another annoying thing, and everybody, and his words were something like, well, the small businesses will get through it. And I was almost shouting at the tail end, yes, we will get through it because we're resilient, because we're optimists, because we have to.
If you were tracking it from the optimist and the growth and taking your business and being really excited, at what point did that start to feel a bit different for you? Or did it? Or did you just keep going?
It didn't. So, like I've said, I am an eternal optimist, and I have an inbuilt sort of voice in my head that's like, I'll be all right. It'll be all right. And that's a really good thing in many scenarios. It can be a bad thing, but I refused to think, having got through all the other challenges that we'd got through, I mentioned a couple, I just thought, we'll work it out. You know, I had a fantastic operations manager and we were dealing with virtually daily crises, but we got through them. So we would, you know, try and find the information we needed. We would talk to our customers. That was a huge one, you know, just staying in contact with our customers. And I think because we'd built that business on our relationships, we lent heavily on them. So when everything was going wrong, the costs were coming in left, right and centre, one of the things we kept up was communication and just talking to our customers and going, we don't know what's happening either, but work with us here, you know. So the whole of January 2021, that was, as I'm sure many businesses who are exporting will tell you, was an absolute nightmare. You know, courier companies shut down, there were duties being imposed that we were assured weren't going to be imposed, and no matter who you spoke to, you were solely responsible, really. It felt like you were basically left alone. I was still working very closely with the DIT, and they would give you fantastic advice, and we would follow that to the letter. The paperwork was phenomenal, but when it came to it, it could be completely different to what they'd advised, and at that point you're on your own. Yeah. I mean, one example which demonstrates this really clearly is when, so around, I would say sort of April, May time, probably earlier, we realised that staying in the UK just wasn't feasible. So we'd had the idea of moving to a third-party logistics company in our back pocket, and we obviously started to make that move. When we finally transferred the stock, so it was probably about £60,000 worth of stock. We did all the paperwork, obviously made sure it was all correct. We're assured that it would go straight through because it was a stock transfer. Next thing I know, we get a phone call from German customs who wanted about £18,000 in duties. At a time when financially we've already been bleeding money for duties, taxes, which shouldn't have been payable. So again, we went back to the people we'd worked with and they said, oh, well, that's wrong. Okay, I know it's wrong, you know it's wrong. Meanwhile, all my shoes, my whole business is stuck in German customs. With that particular scenario, from memory, we managed to get it down to about £7,000.
But you still had to pay?
But you still had to pay £7,000. That shouldn't have been payable. So this is what I mean about the risks versus the unknown risks. It was like the Wild West. So we finally did move all of our operations into Germany. We chose Germany because that was our biggest export country, and it's got a good VAT rate, and obviously the VAT implications is a whole other story, but I don't want to send you to sleep. But yeah, all this time, none of it was being reported about. I remember someone saying to me, well, it won't be because duty, imports and taxes and VAT doesn't make very sexy headlines, which is the truth. But, you know, anyone who is working in import-export will know what was happening.
You were living it.
And still is happening. Yeah. So yeah, we moved everything at great expense and stress, and that brought with it its own sort of nightmares and trying to integrate IT systems when, again, they're still writing the rules for different scenarios was just a nightmare. And I kept going, and I remember calling my dad in the summer of 2022, in floods of tears. I can't remember the exact crisis that had happened that day, but I remember going into the garden, picking up my phone, phoning my dad and saying, I can't do this anymore. And I think what had led up to that as well was that most months by now, I was personally borrowing money to pay the wages, which we would then just about sell enough to pay back. And then the next month on repeat. And I was like, this is not how it's meant to be. This is not, you know. And I think you resist it for so long because you feel like you're giving up. You feel like you've let people down. You feel like you've failed. And that and a love for your business that you have given your all to for over 14 years keeps you going longer than, I probably kept going longer than I should have, but it's easy to say that now. And I spoke to my mum about that and I said, because obviously now I'm in a much better place, thankfully. And I say, I only wish I'd done it sooner. But she reminds me that I know if I had have jumped too soon, I would always wonder, could I have saved that business? Could I have done more? Could I have borrowed more money? Could I have, you know, but I know with my hand on my heart that I tried everything. And at that point, I just had to stop.
And then what happened to Rachel at that point? Did you kind of wake up the next morning thinking, phew, that's a relief, that's all gone now? I presume not. So
it's a long old journey, yeah. So I did then start making the necessary calls, I guess, once you know it's going to happen. So I called upon the Goldman Sachs contacts that I had. So I had a couple of fantastic Zooms with Niall Daly, actually, who was wonderful. And at this point, I was all snot and tears. So I called upon, as I said, the contacts, and that's where the Goldman Sachs alumni and the contacts that I made all those years prior really came into their own. I didn't feel on my own. Had an initial conversation with my accountant, who put me in touch with an administration company. It all started to get very grown up and real. Pretty soon afterwards, I told my team, which was one of the hardest things. We were like a little family, and most of them had been with me for years, years and years. So I kept them in the loop, really from as soon as I possibly could. And then I think one of the things that I've learned is the process is long. I remember the first conversation I had with the administration company, and he said, the day you sign over to me, he said, you'll sleep really well. Yeah, no, it's a long old road, and it's only really now that things are getting finally wrapped up. It's a long road, and it's painful, and you learn a lot about people. But yeah, we're sort of through that now. For a long time, I wanted to just hide under a rock, and I just thought I really felt like I'd let people down. I hid. It's a horrible process anyway, because I've always built my brand on honesty and being 100% authentic. Sometimes too much. I'm very hard on my sleeve. Yeah. But having built a brand on that, to then not be able to talk to your customers, the things you can't say to people because you're going through the administration process is really tough. And I just wanted to get on Instagram and talk to people, and I couldn't. So that was really hard.
Yeah, because part of your brand was you on Instagram talking about your new designs, talking about how excited you were, and then you went dark, basically. I mean, you kept in touch with our little growth group, and we'd see you every now and then. But I could tell at the time, it was a real effort for you to come. We missed you from the alumni community, because you just kind of went quiet, didn't you?
Yeah, because you tell yourself, oh, everybody hates me, I've ruined everybody's this, that and the other, and having come through it, my dad has always said, you're not the centre of the universe. Rude. But he's right, because you're not, because what's happening to you obviously is the centre of everybody else's universe, but it's not, and yes, at the end, I did everything I could to minimise the damage, and with the help of the advice that I got from Niall and the Goldman Sachs community, I also spoke to a couple of people that had been through the process, which really helped. My exit was, I'm going to say, I'm quite proud of my exit, actually.
Well done.
Yes, I hid away to an extent, but in terms of facing up to what I needed to face up and doing what needed to be done as the director of this company, then I'm really proud of my exit. And I did all I could, but there will always be a few people that you have made unhappy through no fault of your own. You can minimise that, but you can't 100% avoid it. And it's those voices that are the loudest. So all the people that, had some lovely messages of support, but you don't really notice those, and you notice the one person who maybe returned their shoes after the event, So yeah, it's you do hide, and I felt like a massive failure, and I'd let everybody down. I was in a lot of personal debt, both my own, and I'd borrowed money, and it was a really not a great time, really.
No. Yeah. So let's talk about you now. What made you come along to our alumni event, bump into Niall, and agree to this interview?
Yeah, so we officially sort of went into administration around November 2022, dark time. And then I was just starting to come out of that very, very slowly. And then at the end of January 2023, I got diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oh gosh, Rachel.
Which I do want to mention, because again, it's a bit like businesses going into administration. More people have been through things than you realise. And we all crack on, and we all present this successful face and this happy face, and I'm a real guilty of that. I'm really guilty of that. No matter what's going on in my life, it's all fine, jazz hands. So that was at the end of January. So just when I was starting to think, right, what shall I do now? Okay. I am eternally grateful and so lucky to say that I got the all clear January this year, and the treatment I had from the NHS was absolutely phenomenal, and I am incredibly lucky. But it kind of makes you think, hang on a minute, it gave me a perspective, I guess, to sort of really look at things. And I never, ever, ever thought I would come back with my brand, Yeah. When I exited, I didn't burn those bridges. So through good advice, I did what I had to do to ensure that if I wanted to use the brand again, I could. Mm-hmm. But I had no intention of doing that at all. And it was sort of, I'd gone through the treatment, and I'd had my operation and radiotherapy, and I was freelancing. So by this point, I've started doing some freelance for a wonderful shoe company that I'm still freelancing for, actually, which I really enjoy. And they were incredibly supportive, and it kept me working, it kept me going.
Kept you creative.
It did. So all of a sudden I was doing the creative things again, and obviously having conversations along those lines, and I slowly started to going from no, not ever, to, oh, I wonder, no. And then gradually, and then I reached a point where I just thought, do you know what? What's the worst that could happen? Because that happened.
Yeah.
And I'm still here. And, I love my brand. But I think one of the things that this whole process taught me is that I never stopped to ask myself the question of what does success look like? I was really unhappy, and I didn't realise how unhappy I was at the time. And I feel like I've almost been given a gift, sounds a bit, but doing the freelance work, starting my brand again, I am designing, I'm being creative, I'm doing the branding, photo shoots, all the stuff that I love, and they were the reasons I started the business in the first place. So it was really towards the end of last year that I started to think, do you know what? And I sat down and I took the time to go, right, what do I want to do and what do I not want to do? So obviously design, creativity, all that side of things. I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. And I almost sketched out, if I did it again, what would I do? Then I placed a very small order for my new collection in December last year. And then I relaunched the brand very quietly April this year, so 4 months ago.
Congratulations. And so this interview marks Rachel coming back into Instagram and podcasts and public face, or are you still going to be quietly in the background creating? So I'm missing, again, having gone from hiding under a rock, the brand is now on Instagram, and I'm enjoying, creating content and engaging in our customers that way. But I have yet to hop on and say hello, but I want to, and going to the Goldman, in answer to your previous question, going to the Goldman Sachs Growth Summit event was a real effort for me. I made myself go because I think that visibility piece is really important, but it's hard, and I think you have to, I am making more of an effort, so doing this interview, getting back on Instagram, all of those things is just saying, I'm back. And what I'm realising is actually I've probably got potentially even more to give now, having gone through the failure of a business, the closure of a business, call it what you like. I've learned more in the last 18 months than I probably did in the whole previous 14 years. Yeah. And I think I almost owe it to tell that story, to say, because I think sometimes people look and they go, oh, it's all right for them because X, Y, Z. But they don't see the struggles, they don't see the, meetings with administrators and the, illness or bereavement or whatever it is that we've been through. We don't present that. And I think it's really important to tell the story that you will get through it, and there is
good stuff on the other side. And it's okay to take time to go through it as well. That's the other thing. You're on this hamster wheel and you think, if I get off, I'll never get back on again. That's it, and everything's going to fall down. And you know what? My business folded and awful things happened, but the world didn't stop turning, you know?
No. You're still here and you're still incredibly brave. So thank you very much for sharing all of that with us.
That's okay.
And I hope this is the beginning of not necessarily the hugest shoe business ever, but certainly one of the funnest and most creative for you, Rachel. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.